I am one of your hosts, Roy Robinson, also known as many by Roy, nickname JR, and I have my co-host over here. Go ahead, spit your info, cuz.
My name is Bruce Woods, better known as Moose by some people. Just happy to be here, ready to build this bridge, build this community, bro. Let's
That's
go.
awesome. That's awesome. So it only makes sense at this current time that we kind of go into this July 4th thing. We got the 4th tomorrow. What does the 4th really mean? I mean, if you really want to talk about what it is proclaimed to be, representation of a flag, Independence Day, fireworks, birth, holiday. When I mention all those things to you, Bruce, what is that? What is that? What comes to mind for you as a black man living in our society right now in 2019?
To be honest, man, it speaks to me a few things. Most of all, smoke and mirrors, and I'll tell you why. As a veteran of this country's military, um, combat veteran, it's supposed to represent, independence, liberty, justice, fairness, all the good things that America is supposed to stand on. But the reality of it is that even in 2019, many of our population, not just us black people, Americans, other minorities, we are not equally set at that table of freedom and equality or independence as it's represented by the celebrations. So if we're not equally represented by the celebrations, then is it really Independence Day? And if it's Independence Day for some of us, but not for others, is it really Independence Day for anybody?
Right, right, right. So when this holiday, so-called holiday, was proclaimed, there's multiple components that you got to think about that are involved in this holiday, right? So there's a financial component to it, right? So
Absolutely.
you got there's that economic portion of it where businesses sell fireworks, they have fairs, they have different things that happen where people are selling. There's a holiday where people are off, so some people are shopping. So
Absolutely.
there's a component there that also plays along with this other part of not being for black people, for people maybe of color, whether they're maybe even Muslim, uh, people who are a certain gender, or people who are identified a certain way that may be
Absolutely.
the norm. And what that norm might be is a straight white male for what they represent.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So when you think about all those things and how it plays, how do you think our culture can do, or what should we be thinking about on what we want to do to move forward? How can we progress forward and say, okay, we don't necessarily have to support the fourth in this manner, even though we've wrapped our arms around the fourth as a as an we've embraced it. We have our barbecues, we have our family get-togethers. How do we take our
Right.
own and move it away from the fourth, right? How do we do that?
Well,
What do you think?
I think first of all, we have to clearly define our lane. I think part of our issue is that we are just opposed in a few lanes. We want to be separate as far as understanding that we as Black Americans have a place at the table. But then when it's convenient, we also want to slide into the mainstream lane and get all the perks of Independence Day, so to speak, or
Right.
just uh, that in general. I'm not saying that. I mean, we're it's right
We want the
being that
days
we
off.
right,
We want that perk, right? We want to be
right,
with the family.
absolutely,
We want the
absolutely.
barbecues. We want the
We want to
plates.
be able to shop a little and do all that
We
stuff,
want to
right?
shop in the
So,
music.
right now, the flip side to that though is if we're going to do that. then status quo is going to continue.
Right.
It's order to make a change. I mean, I forget who said it best, but there's no real change without some type of sacrifice. And at some point, we're going to have to clearly define or make a better stand, first of all, on uh, really amplifying what Juneteenth means to us as Black people.
There we go. There we go.
Actually, uh, and I think it's funny that how Juneteenth even came about, that it really is more representative of our history in America than anything. Juneteenth actually came about because the slaves that were in East Texas and Galveston, Texas, found out 2 years later to the day that we were actually set free. It took 2 whole years
That's
for the
crazy.
news to travel from South Carolina to Texas. Now, in modern times, you could get on a plane and fly from South Carolina to Texas in about 2.5, 3 hours.
That's crazy.
But it took 2 years
That's crazy.
for all of us to get the information that we were free.
To get the
So,
info.
in retrospect, it kind of holds true to the whole dynamic of our history in America. Whereas, yes, you are proclaimed free, but we're still held under the bounds of laws and guidelines that have been legally superseded, but they still hold us down by structural means,
Suppressing us. Right. Right.
I can't get the word right now, but um, just Jim Crow, civil rights movements, all that. We're still fighting a fight to be free.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we're free legally.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you're free legally, but are we free? All these phone calls and people, barbecue Becky's and all that. We can't even go and have a cookout at the park
Right.
before
Right.
somebody's calling us. You know, Guy was at the park with his dog, and he's getting called on because his dog is being a dog to another
Right.
dog.
Right.
Lady,
Right.
lady don't like it, so she gonna call the cops on him because he is not letting his dog is not playing nice with her dog.
Exactly, and that's painful, man. I mean, I'm chuckling, but it's not cool because it's like so common now. It's making us somewhat numb. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
Like so now it's
absolutely.
kind of like we're starting to expect it, and then it's like and it seems like everything that happens to us, it's like this story and the narrative never really seems like it's part of the real truth. It's like no matter I agree with everyone says, there's always two sides to every story, but I don't know why it's a painted picture when it comes to the black male or black female that it's not that true narrative. It's like
Right,
wait a second now, hold on. Like you telling me each and every time, each one of these scenarios, we get this, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this will happen. Hey, out in the open for however long online, goes viral, people are talking about it, boom, 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 and then boom, the next thing happens. Oh, that's
right.
painted on the rug. Then we go on to the next one, like the
And
the
it's
situation with the
way
cop.
like blood water.
It don't make sense. Like the situation where the cops that ran up on the couple that was going with the babysitter and the babies and the pregnant lady, and it just don't even seem real. And then it's like,
Absolutely.
and now it's like, okay, well, we're gonna hold this big town hall. We're gonna talk to these officers and try to get some investigation going. They magically say we're gonna do this, and this, but it seems like there's no true progress. Or all of a sudden we're gonna pass this law and put these body cameras on them, and it just seems like it has not been any progress. I just don't see the same situation going on with. It just seems like it's targeted towards black people, and maybe it's going on with other races. But they just seems like we are out in the forefront. It's like the narrative is towards us for some reason, and I don't know if it's just that it's a good story to them or to everybody. I don't know, but it's unfair. Does that make sense? You know what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say?
yeah, absolutely. D.L. Hughley said it best on his show couple of days, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know when it originally aired. He said, for the most part, uh, black folks, for the most part, we've always had to be extraordinary to get access to anything. And everybody else can be ordinary or be reasonably, just as long as you're a reasonable citizen and not a derelict. It's okay to be average and you can get by.
Right,
Us, we have to be extraordinary to move anywhere forward. And if we're just ordinary, somehow we're suspects. So
right,
we are we
right,
are we are held hostage not by the exception of the rule. We have to be the exception of the rule to progress admirably along, as opposed to our extraordinary works should catapult us way forward. No, it just
right.
gives us a step forward.
It's just one
So,
step. It's crazy.
right,
So like,
right,
let's jump on. I know we got trying to keep this timely, and not really just be on, but I know this is one that can really go a lot of different ways. I'm thinking about the debates that recently happened, the Democratic debates, and Kamala Harris really stood out. A lot of talk about what she said, and she went after Joe Biden, and some of the thoughts that uh, really like some of the statements hit home. She hit some cool statements that really set her apart and really said, okay, I'm gonna go after. Let me tell you, Mr. Biden, about one of the things you voted for, and it was kind of against and oppressed me. I was this little girl that you said, no, I don't agree with her being allowed to go to this other school with more resources that was predominantly white, whatever the case may be, keep us away. The thing that blew my mind, Roland Martin. I just started checking out his show. Shout out to my frat brother, Root to the Q's. Brian Lane put me on the show, Roland Martin, Roland S. Martin show. It's pretty. Roland Unchained. It's off the chain. Martin Unchained, something like that. But it's on YouTube. Definitely check it out. But the point of it, Roland said, which was ingenious, he said there was this mega bill, civil rights bill that was going on. And then at the time, when this big bill was going on, they couldn't do it all. It was just too much. And this is all around the time that where they wanted voting change, civil rights, justice, and equal rights, all the above. And they had to end up breaking the bill apart. The thing that was so powerful is this transportation thing that Joe Biden said no, 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 no. I was for voluntary busing, but I wasn't for government having control over states. And so I'm like, okay, let's think back about this and how it pieces back together. The way Roland broke it down, he blew my mind because if you put that into perspective, we have the same issue today.
absolutely.
All the resources are taken out of whether it's the major city, and all the
Right,
resources they move out further. And they said, okay, you know what? We're not going to stay in this major city. We're going to go further out to these suburbs or counties. We're going to create our own schools and our own stuff out here. We may be minorities left with minimal resources, not enough economically to help support the communities, etc.
right,
And all of a
right.
sudden, you're in a situation where now it's like all the resources everywhere else. I stay in a situation like that where that recently happened. I'm in a school district, Normandy School District to be exact, and they made massive progress. But they at one point when they were unaccredited, a lot of those students had the opportunity to go out to Clayton, which was a better school district for Zumwalt, and it was a struggle. It put a lot of strain on this community. We're having that same issues today, and this is not too long ago. We're talking a couple years back. This is just a
Absolutely,
couple, and Normandy's made progress. I have to put that out there. Normandy's made tremendous progress. I know they're, I'm not sure their accreditation, but I feel like they either partially or got their full accreditation. Something's going on in that realm, but I will say those same issues are going on today. So,
absolutely.
what's your
Well,
thoughts?
it goes along with what I was saying earlier about the our history. It's always been a bait and switch. Um, for the longest time, you have to go back all the way to the industrialization of the cities when the South and the North separated and they were fighting. People moved north to the cities for industrial. Everybody wanted to be in the city center. That's where the jobs were. That's where the housing was. Everything was the city center. Now, as soon as um, blacks started migrating north, and we started catching up economically. Then all of a sudden there was an issue. So
Mm.
now, and actually, a family member of mine said it best. Longtime GM worker, you might know him. He said everything was cool as long as those people who were working on the line were not able to live next door to the white collar bosses.
Right.
But when GM started making enough money, when the line workers started making money to where they could move in the areas where the bosses lived, then there was a problem.
That was a
So
problem,
now all of
right?
a sudden, they had to move out. They called it back in the 70s and 80s white flight.
Right, right,
So
right.
so they moved out in Kansas City where I'm at. They moved from the inner cities. They moved out to on the Kansas side, deep Johnson County. On the Missouri side, they moved out to Lee Summit, to Independence, Gladstones, those areas. Now, this is where the gentrification started coming in too, because after a while, it's cool when you're separated, but then you start thinking about all the expenses that you have from going to work every day, and then you have this commute that we put on ourselves because we didn't want to live next to where we were working.
Right,
So,
right.
so you do that for a while, and then the expenses catch you. And you built the suburbs. The suburbs are thriving now. Now, all of a sudden, those people who are on the inner city is always looking. They're like, okay, they got all this out there, and we don't have anything. Because when they left, they took everything but the jobs because they needed the jobs to stay down there because it was already dirty and messed up, corroded, or whatever. We're not going to bring all that out here. We're just going to go back and forth. But time has evolved.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you know what? We can save a lot more money if we move back closer to our jobs.
Right. Right.
So, we're making a lot of money. We're spending way too much money.
Oh,
So all of a sudden, now you have this idea. Well, let's revive our city centers. Well, if we revive the city centers as it was in the time, I guess, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, all that was left was us
right,
because
right.
there was a thing called redlining, and at that time we couldn't get out of certain areas because if we wanted to buy a house, it had to be within this certain line called a red line.
See that that's
So
that's a whole nother huge topic
yeah, but
because when it
yeah,
that's
go on. We'll save that for another topic.
right. Because that can go way, man.
That's more in Black history. We'll deal with that in a Black history segment.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but to close this, try to close this loophole up. Um, you have a resurgence in trying to reestablish in Kansas City, Missouri. I'll say it. I was gone from Kansas City for almost 10 years. Now, I just went to an event downtown, whereas when I left after 4:30 on any given work weekday, I mean, it was like a ghost town downtown. You couldn't see nothing. I
Wow.
mean, nothing. I mean,
Right.
it would just almost be like everybody. It would be like an apocalyptic look, where people were here just a little while ago, but there's nobody here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to this event, and every corner I'm turning, I mean, there's people everywhere, and I'm saying it's not just us. It's people it's people walking their dogs, riding their scooters. You
Wow.
know, I mean,
It's
it's
thriving.
like,
It's thriving, huh?
yeah, it's thriving. And suburbia has moved back downtown. I mean, seriously. I
Wow.
mean, it was way more people that lived in suburbia downtown, and this was like at this time it was like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. That was ghost town 10 years ago. Now,
That's crazy.
hey, it's thriving. So I say all that to say, um, we have to create our own lane, and understanding that what we have is just as valuable as what they trying to get us to believe is not valuable.
Right,
So once
right.
we create our own lane and start to understanding that what we have and what we treasure is as valuable as they know it is, then we can start taking some of our collective power back.
We should I think we should put some energy around focusing on Yeah, it's July 4th, but we're calling it Juneteenth, or we just put some energy around it so that whether it's our own flag, I saw the flag, they had a black and white flag for the American flag I've seen, but something that, like you say, puts that ownership around, hey, this is ours. We got
Yeah,
this.
yeah, the country couldn't be what it is without our foundation. Let's
Check,
be honest.
check, 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 check. Hands
A
down.
lot a lot of that red is in there, red, white, and blue is our blood on that flag, just like everybody else's.
Check, 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 hands down. They built it on our back. Everything from the culture, everything from what is perceived as cool, everything from
Absolutely,
what spending. We have a very powerful dollar. That's why I brought up that financial component of it. Like,
absolutely,
how do we take some ownership over it? How do we take some ownership? It's like, okay, yeah, you call this Independence Day, but we decided we're going to celebrate this, and then we'll celebrate it
absolutely,
twice. We'll celebrate it on Juneteenth, and we can celebrate it on July 4th. How do we take
absolutely, because
ownership
they're
over
both
that?
ours.
And yes, and we
They're both
chokehold
ours.
it. We chokehold it
Ab-
and say this is ours, and we ain't
Absolutely,
letting it go. And
absolutely,
we build it up from a baby until it matures. You know what I mean?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So
You
I'm
know
glad.
that
Go ahead.
as you were saying that, something struck me with that. Um, there's nothing wrong with the duality of Juneteenth and July 4th, and I'll tell you why. We were they're both integral and they're both are historic significance to not only us but the country at large. It's a part of the American history. So until we start bringing the totality of American history to the forefront and stop going along with the status quo of this separatist but equal history, we won't progress.
Right,
You know, you were saying something else real quick. We are about 12.8% of the population of this country, yet we hold about 87 or 88% of the buying power of
yeah,
this entire country, of the GDP. That is absolutely astonishing
yeah.
for those of us, and we don't make a lot of money. There's some of us who are doing very well. There's some of us, the majority of us are still living below what they consider um, uh, uh,
Average income for from right. Yeah,
aggregate income. We're a little bit above the poverty line as a whole, but the majority of us are still hovering right around the poverty line with a family of
right.
four or whatever. So for that to hold true, despite our numbers, man, we have a lot of power that's untapped, and we
We
just
have
have
a
to refocus ourselves to tap into that power that we have.
right, right. I think we could spend a whole topic on that. I feel like we should dedicate our podcast and everything that we starting off, just so we can kind of wrap this up and understand what we're trying to do. My cousin and I are working on what we want to call the Village Bridge Builders.
Yes,
And
sir.
for those of you who are out there listening and watching, we want you to join our community. We want you to be a part of something that is going to help build us and be a part of that next step for us as a culture, us as a people, us as a us thriving in a system that is difficult, and we'll be able to control and have some control over what we are dealing with, control over who we are, and make it so we everyone can have a better situation. Any 2 cents you want to add on that?
I want to just say we have to control our narrative. We have to stop allowing the mainstream to control our narrative. Real quick, we had a conversation earlier today. People were talking about black on black crime. D.L. Hughley also said it best. Crime is an opportunistic thing. People kill who they're around most. We're the only culture where it's said black on black crime. You don't hear white on white crime,
Don't hear it. You don't
Native
hear it.
American Native American crime, Latino on Latino crime. But you hear, I mean, it's a narrative called black on black crime, but it's a narrative, and
Yep.
we don't kill each other or commit crimes on each other any more than anybody else in this country per percentage of crimes and averages. But
Yep.
when we do it, somehow it's magnified, like
Smack.
we're some kind of
It's that
uh,
story. It's that
It's a
story.
storyline.
That's that
And I
narrative.
think absolutely, and I think
Yeah.
that narrative, if we started controlling our own narrative and start building our defining our own lane, then we can make progress. And also, to add to your point, we want to be able to not only just build us, but to create legacies that we can leave behind
Right.
and be
Right.
able to build generational wealth, even
Bridge
if it has to
builders.
just absolutely. So we're gonna bridge where we come from to today into tomorrow,
Right.
so that so that our children and our grandchildren and the generations after, we won't lose our history because we were afraid to tell our real history, to be honest about our history.
About his story, right? Exactly.
What
Yeah.
about our history? That's absolutely
Exactly. Exactly. That's it, man. Well, hey, it's been great. Podcast #1 in the books.
yes, sir.
We look forward to doing it again. Bruce, signing off, my brother.
Yes, sir.